So today we have Rhonda. Rhonda Powell is the research lab manager at the Clemson Light Imaging Facility. She's a PhD candidate in engineering and science education. Her research explores different aspects of light microscopy education, including what motivates graduate students to consider digital imaging, ethics principles in their research, and how short workshops contribute to microscopy self-efficacy. She also teaches a pedagogy course each fall with Dr. Sylvie Ligoudier called Magnify Your Impact, Train the Microscopy Trainer. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. If I could share my screen, get you guys back. So see you. Okay. Oh, the usual Zoom thing I've hidden myself. Okay, it's fine. All right. So I am Rhonda on the road today. So I'm sorry for the dark hotel room, creepy background. And also my husband might walk in at some point with lunch. But that's just, it is what it is. Trying to find the meeting controls. Hold on. Okay, all right, great. So today is super casual. Take care of yourself. Feel free to comment. Aditi's going to help me monitor the chat a little bit, but you can unmute and just interrupt me and ask a question. This is super casual. I do have an activity. I'll put up some Google spreadsheet in a minute. Participate in that in whatever way works for you. You could also just brainstorm on some paper. Yeah. So there's the link. And there's also a tiny URL if you want to type it in, or we might be able to put that link in the chat too, if you want to get that up. And again, I have to be honest, I don't know how well that'll work for you if you're on mobile. But again, this is an experiment for all of us. So I want to ask you a question. I want you to kind of brainstorm a little bit. Does your training work? Does the microscopy training that you offer, does it work? And you don't have to talk out loud, but I just wanted you to reflect a little bit about if you said yes or no, how do you know? And if you said yes, well, who does it work for? Does it work for you? Does it work for your supervisor? Does it work for the trainees? Does it work for the person whose training you learned from and then adapted to for your own self? Have you ever asked anybody if it works? And then what does it mean that it works? Right? So there are a lot of questions, even from that first sort of self-reflection. And if you wanted to make improvements in your training, again, quote unquote, improvements, what would those look like? What would you compare it to? So if you don't really have a baseline and you change something, again, how do you know that the change that you implemented works, right? So to start out with today, and again, whether you want to try to use the Google Slides or not, what's something that you want to know about your training? Can you think of something? And so I'll just pause there for a minute and let you think about that. And if anybody wants to give me a thumbs up or any indication that the Google Slide spreadsheet's opening at least, Caroline? Yes, okay. And again, if you're having trouble with it, please do feel free to just like brainstorm on a piece of paper. You'll notice that it's anonymous. I'm not asking for anybody's name. That's on purpose. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so we've thought about something we want to know about our training. And so I did want to share a little bit about the ethics of data sharing. So if you're going to get feedback from people, I'm getting feedback from you right now, potentially. If you ask your trainees for feedback, who's going to have access to the data that you collected? Okay, and I think this is something that we all need to consider. Is it for internal use only? Is it for you? Is it for your supervisor? Is it for the facility at large? Okay, so you've thought about that. Is it for sharing out to a bigger audience? Has it crossed the line into research? Okay. If you're planning to share it out with other folks, it may very well be research. And in that case, you really need human subjects training and you need IRB approvals. Okay, so my first question anytime somebody sends me a survey is sort of who has access to this? What is it being used for? And if they can't really answer that question for me, sometimes I won't do it. Okay. In general, I would say best practices are to, again, consider data privacy for folks. I think all of us kind of want to know how our responses to things are being used. And just be honest and open with the people who are offering you feedback. They're going to give you their time and their thoughtful responses. So you need to, be honest with them about what you plan to do with that, whether it's officially a human subject study or not. So as I was trying to think about how to put this talk together, I think I was trying to think of a framework that kind of helps us figure out how to do this, right? Because this doesn't necessarily come naturally for people. But I think a lot of us have had to set our own goals, like for being evaluated by, our job evaluation or whatever. And so you hear of like this SMART framework. And so I'm not sure that I've heard people use this before for like coming up with like coming up with ideas of things that we want to get evaluated in our own microscopy training, but I think it works. So I'm going to see if this framework kind of can work for us today, just to walk us through like the nuts and bolts of this idea. So the SMART framework means that whatever we're thinking of, we want to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit, some examples of what I mean by all of these things, but specific, again, what's something you want to know about your training? You might think that the question that you put already is specific, and then as we walk through some ideas, you might want to modify it a little bit. It has to be measurable. So can you measure or observe the thing? It has to be achievable. Can you change the thing? And again, we'll talk through some details of all these. Is it something that matters to you? And then when are you going to review it and implement feedback? Okay, so let's kind of walk through all of these steps. And there should be a drop-down menu on the Google Sheets where you can sort of rate yourself. So you had this idea that you brainstormed, something you want to know about your training. As I talk through it, you can kind of click for yourself. Does it meet these criteria? Okay. So here are some examples of some things that are specific that you can ask. Okay. And they're kind of different levels of specific. So what if you want to know how were aspects of training design valued by trainees? That's broad, right? But it's still specific. I have an audience in mind. So I want to get information from trainees. And I'm really interested in the training design itself, and I'm interested in how they value that. Okay. You might need to further define the term value. All right. But again, we're pretty specific. More specific might be something like, well, how did the trainees value the sequence of training? So now we're kind of honing in on something in particular that you might want to improve. So let's say you're pretty sure that your content is correct in your training, it works for you, but do people wish that you introduced, this concept before this concept? So you might want to look at something more specific like that. Even further specific could be something like, if I shared these 5 broad topics that I want to teach during training, what sequence would the trainees like me to place them in? And you could give them a survey question where they actually put things in some kind of order. Okay, so you can see it's kind of increasing degrees of specificity. Any of these things could work for evaluating your training. But what doesn't work is something like, do people like my training? Okay, and it doesn't really work very well because which people? Your boss? What does like mean? They're happy that it's over in an hour, but they didn't learn anything? They're happy that you got them into training in, the morning that they asked for it and you trained them that afternoon? Okay, I mean, it doesn't tell you very much, right? So if you don't ask a specific question, you're not going to get very specific feedback. Measurable. There's different kinds of measurable, okay? There's quantitative measurable, so that would be something typically like a survey. This could be like a Qualtrics form, a Google form. You can still hand people paper surveys, okay? You can just give them paper. Paper still works. These are typically going to be in like a Likert scale, so like strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree, things like that. We're all used to seeing ratings like that, or this could even be, I guess, like a 5-star system. This could be a multiple choice type option, okay? But it's something that at the end you can pretty easily get like a graph out of it and maybe some at least descriptive statistics. There are qualitative ways to measure things, okay? And I'm a qualitative researcher, so my education research is qualitative, so I feel much more comfortable in this space than I do the quantitative. But this is where you might give somebody like an open-ended survey question, okay? You could also get really wild with it. You could go in depth and you could do interviews or focus groups or observations, okay? We're probably not going to do that necessarily for our training, but you could, okay? And then there's sort of this idea of mixed methods where you might have some defined survey responses plus something like a please explain. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about the what's good about quantitative versus qualitative. I think I have some slides that we can talk about that. And again, if people have experiences where they've sort of tried these things and you want to share, please feel free to do so. Achievable. It's not necessarily useful to seek feedback about something that you can't control or change. Okay. So again, are users satisfied with the 2-week wait time? Well, I mean, if you can clone yourself and actually change that, then maybe you want to get some feedback about that. But if you can't, just asking that and you don't have any way to fix it, I don't know that that's necessarily the best use of your time or the person whose feedback you're asking for. But if you're trying to demonstrate that your institution needs to hire some more help for you, then this could be, a very achievable kind of question, right? It could be useful. And then again, is it relevant to you? You're the one asking for feedback. So seek feedback about something that matters to you. Do users want to break training up into 2 shorter sessions? Is that something that's interesting for you? Then maybe ask them that. Do people feel confident selecting an objective for their experiment? This is very specific, right? And maybe you really want to tweak this part of your training. Well, then ask those specific questions. Here's one. Do other microscopy professionals think that my training sets up users for scientific success? Okay, this might be a different kind of feedback than what you've thought of before. But if all these are things that are important to you, then these are the questions that you should be asking. Time bound. I can't see most of your faces, but I know that we all like to collect data and then we don't really have time to deal with the data. And that comes for evaluating your own training too, okay? So again, people are busy. If you're going to take the time to ask them for feedback, I want you to make time to review it and then do something about it, implement it, right? So your job is not make a survey, right? Your job is to evaluate your training. And so you've done it in this specific way. You've found out who you can get this feedback from. I want you to put it on your calendar that on the first Monday of the month, I'm going to look at the surveys and I'm going to decide if I'm going to do something with that data, okay? How much time you need to devote to this process really depends on the thing that you want to evaluate and sort of the type of data that you collected. So this is what I was talking about, quantitative versus qualitative. Qualitative data can be really time intensive to review. Ask the girl who's doing this for her dissertation, okay? But it can also be really specific and really actionable because you can get responses that you wouldn't have thought to ask about. So I don't want you to automatically exclude qualitative responses, but I want you to minimize those. So if you ask a survey with 2 or 3 questions, ask one qualitative question. That's going to be enough data for you to review, okay? And the thing with quantitative is that while it's again, going to give you an output that you're pretty comfortable with, like a graph, it might require 10 responses or 20 responses or X number of responses before you feel like you got enough data that you can actually decide to make a change and implement it. And now they're vacuuming here in the hotel, so lucky me. Okay. For the overthinkers out there, welcome to my world. Again, this evaluation, presumably you're doing this for your own training. This is for you. I'm giving you some guidelines. Caroline, you can't hear the vacuum. That's good. But there is no need to overthink it. Okay. So again, I gave you some guidelines. If you ask a couple people some questions and you don't get the feedback that you meant to get, cool. Revise your question, right? Or revise your approach. This is not the end of the world. So do your best to really think through how you should ask it and what you're going to get back. But again, if that's not what you meant, then okay, just change it. I can say that sharing with a friend, it doesn't have to be even a microscopy friend. But sharing with a friend whatever feedback you're seeking could be to get some peer review is always going to be useful. So I'm seeing some folks post things in the chat. If it's anything you want me to respond to, I might need you to raise your hand and say it out loud. But for now, I'm going to keep going. Okay. So again, if you've lost track of the link, now's a good time. I'm going to pause a little bit. Go back to your item that you brainstormed, okay, and revise it if you need to. Let's sort of think through, is it at least a smart thing to evaluate, or is there anything that you might want to change with it? And while you guys take a few minutes, I'm going to look through the chat. Aditi?
Yeah, there's no questions, but just a few comments from Carolyn.
Okay.
I can read them out loud too.
And
I think she's just
I can
cheering
say,
me on.
I'm here. I can just say it anyway.
Yeah.
I feel that it is all about the sort of having the student or the researcher have the samples at hand when they do the training, right? There's no point doing the training and then 3 months later coming back and then they look at the microscope and they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? It has to be like training and then usage really close together. I found that that was very important. Not just going to train somebody just because they feel like they want to use this microscope. They have to have a purpose and a good question. And that's the first step is the planning.
Yep.
And there's a comment from Nicole. I used to do 3 hours training on the microscope and then a 3 hour session supervising the use of the equipment and correcting or answering questions. The problem was the training was very time consuming for stuff, and most of it was repeated all over again the same time. We tried then recorded training that users had to watch first, then answer a questionnaire, and then the guided session on the microscope. Results were diverse after this.
Yeah. I think often it does depend on the researcher as well, how motivated they are to learn the technique, how much they're interested in it. So
Yeah.
there's that side of it. No matter how good your training is, you're not going to be able to solve that part.
Right. Right. And that kind of gets back to, again, like, don't ask for feedback, I think, about things that you're not going to change or can't change or don't want to change. If you like the way something works, I don't know that you want to get feedback about it. So, if you're just trying to validate yourself,
Yeah, right. That's not why we're here.
yeah, it's not necessarily the way to go. So, okay. So we've talked through at least a brainstorm of, something that you might want to get some feedback about. Who can give you this feedback? And you've probably thought about that, your trainees obviously can give you some feedback about your training. And I think that it's obviously really valuable to get feedback from them, but they're not the only source. Okay. So I want you to think outside of that a little bit. Your peers can also give you feedback. Okay, we're in a whole room with people who do the same types of things that you do every day. And they can really be a valuable resource, and we'll sort of talk through how that could work. And yourself. you're there. You're also at training. Okay. And so if you do something, if you do it really intentionally, your own feedback, your own intentional practice can be really useful for evaluating your own training. Okay, so real quickly, let's think about all the things that we could sort of get from our trainees. Okay. Uh, Surveys. I love a good anonymous survey. I think probably you're most likely to get some honest feedback from a survey if it's anonymized in some way. It can't always be. I know some of us don't do tons and tons of training, so I can usually, like, if I give a survey, I still can probably figure out who it is. But a survey can be useful. Okay. You can have an old school suggestion box, right, in your facility where people can just put comment cards. Again, you need to put it on your calendar that you'll empty that suggestion box every once in a while and look at what people put in there. Okay. And you probably have to remind folks that it's there. One of your colleagues told me about an idea that they had to basically have an anonymized email address. So the emails were going to their supervisor about their training. And then that supervisor could bounce back any comments to them. So something like that could work. Again, just a general feedback form. This could be electronic, this could be paper, this could be something that you give to everybody at the end of training. There's an idea that I love to use, at least in a classroom setting. I'll be honest, I haven't used it in a training yet, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. It's something called a 1-minute paper. Maybe just, again, 2 open-ended questions. What's one thing you learned today? What's one thing you're still unsure about? Okay. And you can sort of decide, like, are you going to kind of review those with the trainee right then and see, well, do you want to go back over what you're not sure about? Or do you want to come back, in 2 days after you've digested this a little bit? You could do a traditional quiz. That's trainee feedback. You can just observe some of the things that trainees are doing. Okay, so if you ask them to perform something and you're watching how they're doing it and it's not quite how you meant for it to be, just watching how they're doing things or talking things out with you, that's all trainee feedback. Okay. One thing I think can be really powerful is the idea of sort of like a pre-training versus post-training response or performance. So if you really want to kind of find the baseline of what people know, you might have like a question or two that you ask them kind of consistently, right? Like be intentional with this before you do training. And then maybe you ask that same set of questions at the end of training. And that really helps you kind of measure for yourself, okay, I'm doing a pretty decent job explaining how you set saturation or signal to noise ratios or whatever, things like that. The baseline can really help you understand, like, they don't even know the vocabulary. So I need to think through how I'm explaining it and making sure that I'm kind of meeting them where they're at. Okay, so I've done some pre versus post more in like a workshop setting. But I do know, again, some of your colleagues have tried implementing this into their training too. Okay. Again, I'm not a quantitative researcher. I don't feel super comfortable with survey design. So I got you guys some different resources for this. Okay. There's a few things that I can say. Survey fatigue is real. And, if you're tired of even somebody's telling me, I'm tired of rating every like DoorDash driver that I have, right? People get tired of doing this all the time. So I do want to point out that, again, you'll get more high quality information, high quality feedback from your trainees or whoever if you ask them a few targeted questions than if you ask everything you've ever wondered about your training. And this is what I meant by being specific. Okay. Pick one thing that you're interested in sort of modifying and ask a few questions about that and then let it go. You don't have time to review it. They don't have time to give you the feedback. You're not going to do anything with all of it. So just take a few things at a time, okay? Survey design is an art and a science. There's a lot of psychology to survey design. So this is a seminar that I attended by Dr. Kwan. When she finished it, she sent us the recording and she said we could share it with anybody that we wanted to. So I hope that she meant it because I'm sharing it with all of you today. But it's wonderful. It's about an hour and it really breaks down some survey design questions that you probably have. So I would watch that if you're really interested in that. Okay. So again, we've talked through all the things we can get sort of from our trainees. I want you to think about ways that you could get maybe some feedback from your peers. Okay. So if you make training materials, so again, one of you just brought up like doing, videos or something like that. It might make a lot of sense to you, but you already know how to use the microscope. So it might be nice to get some feedback from somebody who works in like a different, microscope ecosystem. They work on Zeisses and you work on Leicas or whatever. And you look at the materials, you have your peer look at the materials that you developed and see if it makes sense to you. Or even better, what I love to do is, again, my husband is not a microscopist. So I love to share things with somebody who knows nothing about what we do and get their feedback on materials because they're going to have, again, a whole different set of feedback. Okay. You can video your training and share it with a fellow microscopist and get an outside perspective. If you think, I don't know if I spend as much time on subject X as everybody else does, but I've kind of always wondered that. Well, then video yourself, share it with them, see if they think that there's like some critical thing that you're missing. Now, having said that, we all have our own resource time constraints. So again, don't seek feedback that you don't want. They might make your training an extra hour or two, okay? But it's definitely a way for you to evaluate your training. And then one idea that I think is really cool is this idea of sort of a critical friend. So if you can run your training and have somebody be on Zoom, like actually watching your training live, this is a great way for them to sort of watch you, right? They can give you some feedback about how you run training, your content, how you're delivering the material. They can also watch how the trainees are reacting to you in real time. And that's something that you probably don't really get an opportunity to do if you sort of get lost in what you're trying to say. So critical friend is great. And then I think self-evaluation is a really important practice. I think we should all be doing this. But if you're intentional with this, you can really use your own feedback. Okay. So you can journal about how trainings are going and you can make notes about things that felt successful or challenging. You can kind of start a little log sheet of like, what questions do trainees often have? Again, either during training or when they come back. Right? So what do you always see that they're struggling to set up on their own? And start to make those notes. And then it can kind of move from anecdotal to, 10 out of 20 trainees don't understand this part, or nobody is saving their metadata files. Everybody is just exporting TIFFs. I know I'm telling them, so those common things that come up, you'll actually have a log of that, and that can be really useful. What are you seeing them struggle with? You can record yourself and observe your own training. So if you're not ready to do that recording and share it with a peer, you don't have to. Nobody's making you. But just watching yourself from an outsider's point of view can be useful. And then again, set regular times to review these notes and these observations and then try some new ideas. You probably then, if you try something new, you want to record yourself again in a month after you feel comfortable trying this new thing. So I'm going to pause. Again, if there's anything that you want to modify now that we've talked about, different audience members, different ways that you can get feedback. And then I listed, I think 3 questions. So I think I stayed with my own rule about how the brainstorming form is working, and especially because I have not looked at that at all during this session. Let me know how user-friendly that was. I'm guessing tough if you were on mobile, but okay. So again, I have some more slides. I have some things that I've actually kind of tried in real life. And I'm happy to tell you guys about those. But I also do just want to remind you that you're more than welcome to, speak up, ask any questions, comments, concerns, whatever. Okay. So I talked a little bit about this idea of like sort of pre-post surveys, quizzes, whatever. And I've done this a number of times now, and I find this to be really powerful. I've done it mostly, again, in a workshop setting and a course that I've taught. But you're basically asking the participants to rank themselves, or again, it could be like a knowledge quiz, either like before the intervention and then afterward. This was really nice because I could really see the growth in certain areas. And again, even though this is self-evaluation, it doesn't really matter. They themselves walked into a training or a workshop or whatever and didn't feel like they knew a whole lot about this thing. Do they rank themselves higher later? I could also see what they were probably a little bit overconfident about. So, for example, when I ask about microscopy self-efficacy, that's just like self-confidence in microscopy, okay? I always ask a question like, I can design and build my own microscope. I mean, I can't, okay? But I do usually have a few people who are like, yes, expert. So that at least tells me that maybe the rest of their responses are skewed maybe a little bit higher. So that gives me a little bit of a frame of reference. Even though it's a self-evaluation, I can still get information out of that, but I can think, well, this person feels pretty good about what they can do. I've tried Critical Friend. So in our Magnifier Impact course, someone actually sat in on one session, maybe two. And again, not as a student, but to sort of observe us as the instructors and the people who were taking the class. And they went to the activities so they could see like what instructions we thought were clear, like how much people were actually struggling in groups. Um, and then we had a discussion with them immediately after they attended. So I think if you can invite somebody again to just kind of watch on Zoom your training or something like that, I think that can be really powerful because you're not always seeing those confused faces, but the person who's watching your training can tell you like you really lost them at this halfway point or whatever. So yeah, I think that really helped us identify some unique frustration points for the people who were in front of us. And then for self-reflection, I just generally have like a running Google document because I can just have it going on my phone. You could use your notes app or you could just have an actual notebook. Again, of things that worked well or didn't work well during a course, training, workshop, whatever. And this could be things like timing, it could be the order of things, it could be, wow, I saw a lot of confused faces after I started talking about this. Okay. I do not just write, this didn't work, because a lot of times that might be me, again, overthinking something. So I always try to write what I would improve, what I would do differently. I go ahead and add that in my self-reflection. And I try to include the evidence of why I think it didn't work. Because again, maybe I just had a bad day. So without that sort of evidence, I don't really have an evaluation. I just have a Dear Diary, and I don't want that. I want to try to add the evidence to it. This is a fun one. Again, not necessarily for like microscopy training, although you could do that if you wanted to get people up and moving. It's probably a little awkward if it's just you and one trainee. But in a workshop setting, again, different ways. People get tired of like, just doing like digital responses or whatever. And so I've done a four corners activity. So I presented them with a problem, and rather than have like A, B, C, D answer choices, I get them to vote by moving around the room. So I'm like, I give them, here's an experimental design, here's your imaging conditions. Can you actually do this experiment? And you can see I give them lots of fun choices. So they're either like enthusiastically, yes. And so they go to the yes corner. They can also go to the maybe, I think I need more information corner, or they can go to the what are we even doing corner. Okay. And that's fine. Some of them go to the what are we even doing corner. Um, if it's really split, sometimes, again, this is in a workshop environment, I'll ask people to um, maybe explain why they ended up in each corner. And if it's really split, that's usually instant feedback for me to know I need to reteach this right then because people are not getting it. So again, if you train in small groups of like 3 people, this is something that you could probably incorporate, and it gets people up out of their chairs for a little bit and have a little bit of a brain break. So you could try something like that. I think that's all I have from an evaluation standpoint. Um, I did want to go ahead and advertise our Magnify Your Impact 2026 course application is open. If you want to scan that, or I'll get that shared out through BINA, hopefully at some point soon. Anyway, you've got till August 1st to apply. I think that's it. So I would love if any of you want to show your faces besides me and Caroline, and if anybody has anything that they want to chat about, I've got time. Hey, Doug.
To be honest, I mainly train researchers now to how
Yeah.
to do it right. So I think it's not just the microscopy, it's kind of all of it, right?
Mhm.
And I deal with biotech companies, and sometimes they come in so hard, and I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
you know,
Whoa.
whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. I want 30 markers, and I'd like expression analysis on all of it, and you're like, whoa.
Well,
So let's talk about how we can achieve that in a few years, and then we'll come to this. So I find I'm in a constant state of training, even though I don't run a core anymore.
yeah. Hey, Laura. All right. Well, I guess we can have back some 18 minutes or something.
I have a quick question, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm here
Yeah,
at UNC Wilmington in North Carolina. So we run our we run our microscopy core more as a teaching and training facility for our students. I actually teach a bioimaging for the life sciences course and an EM course. So we're very fortunate that we actually have a lot of students come through, undergrads, grads. We don't have as many kind of postdocs or other researchers. And uh, I'm curious to know, in terms of how we run the facility, I always like to present data to administrators on usage, products, outputs, impact. Um, in terms of designing the user survey, do you collect data that can kind of be used to inform administrators and funders on the sort of success side of the training? Like, where do the students go once they've trained and done work in the lab, and the sort of longer term impact? And have any ideas or suggestions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I am fortunate enough, I guess, that I am really like more the lab manager side. So I get to do the fun part. I get to do the training, and I don't have to think so much about like big picture impact to things. But certainly over the years, yes, when we've had to put together like different business plans and things like that, yes, for sure we have asked users, those kinds of things, try to collect the data about how many papers they put out or grant applications or things like that. But um, I mean, I think that's totally valid. And again, I think everything that I said still stands. Trying to be really specific with like, what do you actually need to share with the administrators? Not everything you've ever wanted to know. And just being really open and honest with whoever's going to complete the survey about like, yeah, this isn't just for me. This is to try to secure, funding or personnel or whatever. So I think that there's absolutely, that's a common thing I think cores have to do.
Okay, thank you. And I was
Yeah.
thinking in terms of the student impact, readiness for the job market, whether the students feel like their time using the facility, had a high impact on their own research success, those kinds of things. So the sort of, yeah, still within the training context, but also then being able
Yeah.
to use that data to say, hey, 80% of the students felt XYZ about their experience in the core. Um,
And isn't there, maybe somebody in the group knows because I'm going to completely blank, but I feel like there's a hidden contributions metrics that maybe they do out of the UK or something like that. That's exactly this sort of thing that, again, it's not just dollars, it's not just publications. I forget what it's called. So if anybody remembers. But yeah,
thank you.
Bye, Caroline. Doug is saying in the chat, I think that, yeah, he tracks, yeah, big picture, they do track the number of people who have undergrad honors, MS, PhD. Yeah, but that's all we can manage. Yeah, at some point, you just kind of have to think about who's going to deal with all of that data. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in addition to assessing like just whether people are a little overconfident at the beginning, have you found any connections between just like overall attitudes towards microscopy, towards like you as a trainer, how the attitude of the training influences their success?
Ooh, I haven't really done like affect and perceptions and things like that, but I might fall into the category of I don't ask that because I don't want to know.
It's a good point. I was just curious.
Um, you know, yeah, Laurel, good question. I mean, I think if that's, if people have ever like told you, I guess, that you're like, I don't know, coming across as some kind of way, and you know that that's something that you want to work on personally or professionally, then certainly you can ask those kinds of questions. But yeah, I sort of I am what I am and they get what they get. So I don't ask that. Oh, yay, I think lunch is here. All right, what else? What other questions can I ask for you guys? Or just, again, any brainstormy things that you thought of? All right. Well, I wish you all good luck and good success with evaluating your own training, and everybody enjoy a little summer break from BINA events, I guess.
Thank you so much, Rhonda, for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely.